All right, settle in. Tonight's story might make you squint into the darkness and wonder how you ever took fresh air for granted. The floor is slick beneath you. Your knees dig into it. You can't stretch out. Not fully. Not really. Someone is pressed against your left shoulder, another against your right, and no one's spoken in what feels like hours. The wood above you groans like it's also alive, like it's trying to complain, but knows it doesn't have the worst job here. You're not on land anymore. That ended days ago, back when men with hard eyes and wide hats shoved you onto a boat and locked the world shut behind you. This is what boring history for sleep sometimes does. It sails into the places where the air smells like rusted chains and old blood, and yet somehow you're supposed to drift off to that. But it's fine. We'll go gently. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with your location and local time, because wherever you are, it's probably a little more breathable than where you're about to go. Now, here's a fun phrase, the middle passage. Sounds like a cozy hallway in a drafty castle, right? But no. It has 3 months of floating across the Atlantic in something between a coffin and a sardine can. It's dark. It's rank. And it doesn't matter if it's morning or night, because the sun doesn't visit this far below deck. What visits instead are rats, and sometimes panic. Your ankles are shackled, not metaphorically. Iron rings bite into your skin, and if you shift too much, they bite harder. Someone coughs near your feet. Another whimpers in their sleep. You lose track of how many people lie beside you, above you, beneath you. You all smell like salt, sickness, and the shared knowledge that this isn't the end of the journey. Just the part where your old life slips away without even saying goodbye. You probably think about home, but home is fading. You remember the pattern on your mother's cloth, but it feels distant, like something from a dream you had as a child. One of the few things still clear is the voice that shouted your name when they took you. You replay that moment often, not because you want to, but because you can't stop it from repeating. You haven't eaten in a while. When food comes, it's more like a dare than a meal. Gruel, maybe, or salted meat that smells wrong. You try not to eat, but your body has other ideas. The water they give you is warm and tastes like metal. Someone gets sick nearby. That smell doesn't go away. Now here is a bizarre historical detail you didn't ask for. Some ships installed tiny air holes in the deck, not out of kindness, but because people kept dying too fast. Dead people were bad for business. Dead people don't get sold. So the captains needed you alive, just barely. They'd make you dance on deck in chains, force you to, exercise, so you wouldn't rot before you could be bought. A kind of nightmare aerobics. You don't speak the language of the crew, and they don't want to understand yours. To them, you're cargo. Human cargo, sure, but that qualifier doesn't soften anything. You're listed on a ledger. You're counted by head, not by name. One man near you won't wake up. He's been still for too long. When the ship rolls a certain way, his body leans into yours. You pretend not to notice. Later, the sailors come down and drag him off. You don't know where they put him, but the splash tells you enough. There's a kind of fever that creeps through the hold. It moved from person to person like it has legs. You feel it crawl up your spine, and suddenly the rocking of the ship makes your stomach churn more than usual. You wonder, not for the first time, if this is where you die. But then you wake up. Again. Another day. Or night. You can't tell. Someone's humming softly. It's not a song you know, but it doesn't matter. You hum along anyway. Here is a scholarly debate to lull you deeper. Historians still argue how many people didn't make it across the Atlantic. Some say 1 in 6 died on the way. Others say more. The real number is foggy, lost to ledgers that valued property over people. What we do know is that this was industrialized suffering. Repetition, efficiency, profit. It wasn't madness. It was math. At some point, your body gets used to the stench. Or maybe it doesn't, and you just run out of outrage. You sleep in short bursts, cradled by waves and someone else's elbow. You start to know the rhythm of the boat. When it creaks a certain way, you know someone is walking overhead. When the bell rings, you brace. That bell doesn't bring good things. But then, after one impossible eternity, there's a shift. The noises above change. Voices bark louder, faster. The boat tilts in a way that means land might be near. The chains stay on, but now your heart pounds for a different reason. And just like that, the hatch opens. Real sunlight floods in. It's so bright it makes you squint, even though your face is still in shadow. They unshackle you, not for freedom, just for the next part. You try to stand, but your legs argue with you. It takes effort to remember how to walk, but you walk anyway. Up the steps, out of the dark. The sun is hot. The sky is high. The new world smells like molasses and ash. Welcome to the coast of someone else's empire. The sunlight doesn't feel like yours. It sears into your skin with a kind of arrogant intensity, like it knows it's the first thing you've seen in weeks and wants to punish you for looking directly at it. The boards of the dock are rough beneath your feet, splintered and salt-stained. They tilt slightly as you walk, like the world itself is still swaying with the rhythm of the ship. You squint, your eyes watering, as someone shouts in a language you still don't know. You step onto land, but nothing about it feels grounded. The ground burns your soles. Everything smells like sugar rotting in the heat. Even the breeze, thick as it is, carries notes of charcoal and sour smoke. You're not sure if it's the air itself, or something clinging to the clothes of the men watching you disembark. One of them pokes you with the butt of a stick, guiding you like cattle. He's chewing on something and doesn't meet your eye. You take another step and realize your knees still remember the boat, bending too much, not trusting anything solid. Someone ahead of you stumbles, and a whip cracks. Not on skin, just nearby, in the air. A warning. You keep walking. This is the beginning of your new life, they say. But no one says it to your face. They just file you into a line. You're on display now, standing half naked in the open air, while strangers judge your teeth, your height, the shape of your shoulders. A man grabs your arm, squeezes the muscle, grunts, then moves on. Another lifts your chin, stares into your eyes like he's checking a horse for illness. At some point, someone writes something down beside your new name. Not your old name, the one you were born with, is gone, burned off in the voyage. This new name is shorter, clipped, easier for someone else's tongue. It doesn't feel like it belongs to you, and maybe it doesn't. Here's your core historical fact. These slave markets were public, loud, and mundane. They didn't happen in dark corners. They were central, accepted, woven into the fabric of daily commerce. There were even advertisements, yes, printed ones, boasting the arrival of a fresh shipment, like it was bananas or lumber. You get sold, fast. You don't know the price, but the man who buys you looks pleased. He's wide, red-faced, wears boots that clack when he walks. He doesn't speak to you, just jerks his head and expects you to follow. You do. The road away from the market is long and lined with trees that look like they're re-wilting from the heat. Birds squawk above you, too lazy to fly. Insects buzz so loud they seem mechanical. Your skin itches, not just from the bites or the sweat, but from the feeling that your own body is rejecting this new air. Eventually, you see where you'll be staying. It's not a house, not really. More like a shed with thin walls and a roof that sags in the middle. Inside, it's dark and dusty. There's a cot in the corner, made of rough wood and something pretending to be fabric. No door. Just an opening covered with a torn cloth. This is home now. You sit, It's the first time you've sat without chains in weeks. You almost don't know what to do with that freedom. Outside, there's music playing from a distant part of the plantation. A low drum beat, laughter. It sounds like celebration, but it doesn't reach you. Not yet. Here is your bizarre historical detail. Some plantations made newcomers eat charcoal to cleanse them, believing it helped with disease. Others shaved your head, not for hygiene, but because it tamed your appearance. Everything was about control, not health, not care, control. The man returns that night. He brings food. Sort of. It's cornmeal, barely cooked, and something oily and gray beside it. You eat without asking. Hunger makes questions unnecessary. He speaks, slowly, in the local dialect. It's broken, rough, full of borrowed words. You pick out a few things. Your name, the word cut, the word work. He points at your hands, and at a blade leaning against the wall. Morning comes before your eyes even close properly. Someone bangs a pot outside. You rise because others are rising. A group of people stand near the shed. They nod at you. One of them hands you a strip of cloth and motions toward your waist. It's your new uniform. You tie it clumsily. The field is enormous. Rows upon rows of tall, sharp plants. Sugarcane. Looks harmless enough until you start swinging the blade. Then it fights back. The leaves slice your skin like paper. The stalks bite your knuckles. The sun blisters your neck, and the sweat stings every cut. And here's where the boring history for sleep part really kicks in. Because this is your new normal. This every day. The same bell. The same steps. The same sting in your fingers. History tends to list sugar production like it's an economic trend. It rarely mentions what it feels like to swing a machete for 14 hours and then collapse on a dirt floor. There's a moment late in the day when your hands forget how to hold the blade. It slips. Your knees buckle. You drop to one side and brace for a whip. But none comes. The overseer sees it. Just one glance. You expect pain, but instead he nods. Just once. As if to say, that's the wall. You've found it. Some nights, people around you whisper stories from the old world. Names of rivers, tales of clever animals, tricks to confuse evil spirits. It helps you sleep, sometimes. Sometimes not. Here is your scholarly mystery for the night. There is debate over how much memory enslaved people kept of their original culture in those early years. Did they lose it quickly? Did they blend it into something new? Did the stories survive the crossing? Or were they rewritten on this new shore? Historians argue. You just close your eyes and try to remember your mother's face. It's barely morning when the pot clangs again. That pot, that metal clanget cuts through dreams like a knife. You jolt awake before your eyes even open, body already bracing. You don't stretch. There's no point. Your arms are sore from yesterday, and the day before that, and the day before that. Sleep is not rest here. Sleep is just a short tunnel between two beatings. You tie the same strip of cloth around your waist. Your fingers fumble. You don't even flinch when it rubs over the cut on your hip. That cut is part of you now, like your elbow or your shadow. You shuffle outside with the others, into the humid weight of dawn. Today, the sugarcane looks taller, sharper. The sun's not even up properly, and sweat is already crawling down your back. The bell rings, the blade finds your hand, and your body remembers its choreography. You chop, you move, you drag, over and over. And here is something cheerful for your morning dose of boring history for sleep. The average life expectancy for a field slave in a Caribbean sugar plantation was about 7 years. Not because of age, but because sugar doesn't just drain energy. It eats bodies, slowly, and then not so slowly. The machete has no mercy. Your calluses crack, your nails blacken, your shoulders twitch at night, like they're still swinging the blade. You've stopped measuring time in days. Now it's by how many fingers still feel normal, how many toenails haven't fallen off. One man in your group starts humming a tune under his breath, the same one every day, like it's holding him upright. You hum along. You don't remember when you started. Meals come in the same tin bowls, under the same crooked tree. Cornmeal, bits of smoked fish if someone's luck ran out at the river. Sometimes plantains, boiled until they forget they were ever fruit. You eat. You don't taste. Hunger is stronger than opinion. At night, you sit in a small circle near the sheds. No fire. Just moonlight and tired eyes. Someone retells the same folktale about a spider who tricked a lion. Everyone laughs in the same spot, even though you've all heard it 100 times. It's not about the joke anymore. It's about the rhythm, the familiarity, like a lullaby for people who forgot how to sleep peacefully. Here is your bizarre historical detail. Some plantations in the French colonies issued small rations of rum to enslaved workers at the end of the week. Not out of kindness, out of strategy. It dulled pain, slowed resistance. A drunk worker was easier to control. One sip of sugarcane liquor made from the very fields you bled into. A bitter toast to survival. One evening, you see a girl trying to walk with a twisted ankle. She's about 12, maybe. You think her name might be Emma, or Amare, or something close. You haven't heard her speak in days. She tries to hide her limp. Fails. The overseer doesn't punish her. He just marks something in his book. You don't know what that means. You just know she's not in the field the next morning. No one talks about it. But you all notice the silence she leaves behind. There's a language now between you and the others, not a spoken one. More like a code built from glances, nods, the way someone hands you a tool or stands between you and the overseer for half a second longer. These are the only kindnesses left. Here's your core historical fact of the night. The plantations were designed to erase individuality. Names, families, languages, memories. If they could have wiped your fingerprints off your own hands, they would have. But the human mind, even in agony, clings to fragments. That's what history forgets. The fragments. And now, here is the debate scholars love to tangle with. How many enslaved people managed to escape their conditions not just physically, but mentally? Did they imagine alternate lives? Did they dream in freedom? Or did the cane fields eventually swallow those parts whole? You don't know what scholars think. You just know that sometimes, in the few quiet seconds before sleep, you imagine walking away. Just walking into the jungle, barefoot and bleeding, never looking back. But then the clang comes again. Morning. Always. Today, a new man joins your line. He still has that saltwater look eyes sunken, wrists rubbed raw from iron. You recognize him, not because you know him, but because he looks how you felt when you first stepped off the ship. You nod to him. He doesn't nod back. That's okay. You didn't either at first. Later, after the bell and the blades, after the food and the flies, after the whip cracked too close to someone's ear and made them cry out loud later, when the stars appear and the frogs start their nightly sermon, you sit beside him. He says one word. Just one. A name. It might be his, or someone he left behind. You repeat it softly, testing it like a stolen piece of fruit. He looks at you, just for a second, and you both know it's enough. Names matter. Even here. Especially here. The cane knife doesn't sing on Sundays. It leans against the shed wall, silent and sticky, while your hands twitch from habit. No bell clangs. No overseer screams. And yet, you still wake up before sunrise. Your body doesn't understand the word rest anymore, only patterns. Still, Sundays feel different. The air moves a little slower. The birds sound more curious than urgent. And for once, there's a smell warm, sweet, spicy, that drifts through the huts like an old memory coming back home. Someone is cooking. That's the first sign. The second is music, not loud. Just a few soft drum taps, a whistle, the rustle of feet brushing dry earth. Someone hums. Someone else claps once, sharply, like punctuation. Then laughter, real laughter. Brief but unmistakable. Sundays are market day, church day, trickster day, and sometimes rebellion day. If you're lucky, it's all four in one. You don't have freedom, not even close, but on Sundays the plantation pretends to loosen its grip, just enough to let people breathe. You're allowed to gather with others from nearby fields. You walk barefoot along a dirt path that cuts through the trees. It's lined with people selling yams, fish, carved trinkets, roasted corn. Someone offers tobacco rolled in dried leaves. Another balances bananas on her head like it's nothing. You trade a small carving you whittled in secret. Get a bit of meat and a cloth scrap in return. It feels like robbery in reverse. You smile. The church bell rings and people shuffle toward the clearing. Not everyone believes. Not everyone sings, but many do. It's the kind of place where a hymn in English blends with whispers in Ewe, Yoruba, Kakongo. Faith becomes code, a way to mourn and to plan. Here's your core historical fact. Enslaved Africans often blended Christianity with traditional beliefs, creating what scholars now call syncretic religion. You'd call it survival. Spirits of old gods wrapped in biblical verses. A sermon with a side of ancestral memory. Jesus on the wall, but the river god still listening. Later, under the trees, people gather around a fireless circle. No light, just darkness and voice. This is where the ghost stories live. The boy with one red eye who stole from the dead and got dragged into a grave. The girl who danced so beautifully that death fell in love and wouldn't let her stop. The tree near the cane fields that whispers your name only if you lie. They scare you, not because of the monsters, but because you start to believe them. Here's your bizarre detail. Some enslaved people swore that the sea itself could talk, that if you listened closely, it would whisper your real name, the one you had before the ship. They said the waves knew your mother's voice, that they carried memories, not just salt, and you believe it, or want to. There's a man everyone calls grandfather, though you're not sure he has any blood kin left. He's old, hunched, and walks with a stick that's more cane than wood. But when he speaks, everyone listens. Tonight, he tells the story of the first time he tried to run. He didn't get far. The dogs caught him. He lifts his shirt and shows the scars. But his voice doesn't break when he says, "I tried again." He doesn't say how many times. Only that once, a bird flew beside him the whole way. A black bird, silent, fast. He took that as a sign. You're not sure if he made it to freedom once, or if freedom just meant climbing a tree and staring at the stars in peace for a night. You think about trees a lot lately. Sometimes, when the overseer's voice fades into the distance, you stare at the branches above the cane. You imagine what it would feel like to climb. Not to escape, but just to sit. To be above things, even briefly. Here's your scholarly mystery. Historians argue about how much resistance really happened. Some point to revolts, sabotage, escapes. Others argue most people were too broken to try. But they forget the quiet rebellions, the stolen mango, the hidden drum, the whispered insult in a language no overseer understands. Tonight, someone brings a mango. Ripe, golden, forbidden. You pass it around, each person taking just one bite. It's the sweetest thing you've tasted since the voyage. No one talks while eating. It's sacred. When it's gone, you all breathe, like you've just performed a ritual. Maybe you have. You lie down in the grass, near the huts. You look up. No roof blocks your view tonight. Just stars. Some seem to flicker in time with the drums. Others feel cold and quiet. You find one and stare at it until your eyelids get heavy. This is boring history for sleep, right? So here's your fact. The slave trade reshaped economies, cultures, populations. But it also reshaped the sky. Sailors used stars to navigate from Africa to the Americas, carving paths between suffering and profit. But you lying here don't care about navigation. You just want one star to remember your face. You see him every day, that man with the ink-stained fingers. He wears a wide hat and walks like the sun owes him something. He never picks up a blade. He doesn't swing, sweat, or flinch when the cane's edge draws blood. His hands are soft. One of them always holds the little black book. That book knows your weight, your age, your value. It knows how many days you've missed, which tools you've broken, how many lashes you've been given, and why. If you have children, it knows their names too, and what they might fetch at market in 5 years. It tracks everything. Almost. What it doesn't track is the sound you make when you laugh at night. It doesn't to record the exact way you whisper your mother's inane when no one is listening. It doesn't note how your fingers move when you shape tiny birds from cane scraps or carve a face into the side of your hut. That book doesn't care that you helped the old woman with the bent back carry her basket yesterday. It doesn't to record how many times you've looked at the jungle as edge and thought, maybe today you aren't human in the book. You're arithmetic. This is the part of boring history that tends to get footnoted, skimmed, or sanitized. Enslaved people weren't just property. They were documented property, tracked like cows, assigned numbers, managed with the same cold precision as inventory in a warehouse. But here's something the book always forgets. You have your own book. It's not written in ink. It's stored in glances, hand squeezes, melodies hummed under your breath. It's written in footpaths, the kind that twist through the trees when no one's looking. It lives in the way you lift your chin when the overseer passes. Just slightly. Just enough. You pass the overseer today and catch a glimpse of his notes. He's scribbling something beside your name. Your new name. The one he gave you. You don't flinch. Let him write. You spend the day in the mill instead of the field. New task. New burn. The cane goes in one end, gets crushed between massive iron rollers, and the juice flows out like blood. That juice gets boiled in giant copper pots. The smell is overwhelming, sickly sweet, hot, metallic. It clings to your nostrils like guilt. The steam scalds your arms. Your shirt sticks to your skin. You don't think. You just lift, pour, wipe, repeat. Someone nearby collapses, not from a whip, just from heat. They get dragged out. No one says anything. You keep working. Because if you stop, you join them. Here is your bizarre historical detail. Those copper vats were so hot that sometimes the workers dropped dead into them. And do you want to know what happened next? The boiling didn't stop. There are whispered stories of sweet meat batches, horrific, but whispered often. Later, back in the shed, you stare at your hands. They don't look like yours anymore. The skin is tight in some places, torn in others. Your fingerprints feel like they've been rubbed off. You wonder if they'd even recognize you back home. If home still exists. Someone sits next to you. A boy, maybe 10. He's new. You can tell by how he flinches at small noises and hides his hands when not working. You offer him a piece of roasted yam. He hesitates, then takes it. Doesn't say a word, but the way he eats tells you more than speech ever could. Here's your core historical fact. Despite everything, family ties were built and rebuilt in these places. People adopted each other, raised strangers' children, created kinship out of necessity, love, or sheer defiance. If blood didn't bind, suffering did. Community was carved, not inherited. The overseer's book wanted to tell you who taught the boy to fish using only a thread and a bent nail. or who showed him how to tie a head wrap just so, like his mother might have. But you know, and he'll know. There is a mystery historians still pick at. How much did enslaved people really know about the world beyond the plantation? Could they grasp the scale of their exploitation? Or was it all just immediate work, survive, repeat? You think the question misses the point. You don't need a map to feel you've been stolen. You don't need a compass to know which direction pain comes from. You don't need to speak the overseer's language to understand cruelty. You know enough. You always have. One night, as the moon slices through the trees, you hear someone singing in a tongue older than this soil, not loud, just enough for you to hear. It makes your chest ache. You can't place the words, but the melody feels like memory. Someone else hums along, and someone else. No book records this moment, but you will. Tomorrow, the overseer's book will say you spilled a bucket of cane juice. It won't mention that you did it on purpose to slow the boiling line, that you blocked the drain with your heel for 5 precious minutes of chaos, that someone pocketed an extra mango while no one was looking. He'll write, disobedient. You'll write, alive. It comes quietly. No bells, no fireworks, no sudden lifting of chains. Just a murmur that spreads from mouth to mouth, hut to hut. Someone says the king across the sea signed something. Someone else swears a man in the big house read a letter with a trembling hand. You don't believe it at first. Most don't. You've lived too many lies in the heat to trust something delivered on paper. Still, the next morning, something's different. There's no pot banging, no barked orders, no overseer at the gate. You wait. 10 minutes. 20. Then someone, an old woman with a long scar down her arm, walks out of the yard with her head high and her basket empty. No one stops her. That's when the others begin to move. Not all at once. Slowly, cautiously. You stand, too. Your legs are ready, even if your mind isn't. This is what freedom looks like? You expected more noise. Here's your core historical fact. Emancipation came in waves, across countries and years. In some colonies, it was declared overnight. In others, enslaved people were forced to serve apprenticeships after freedom. An insult dressed as policy. A leash made of paper. You walk past the edge of the field. No one stops you. You walk farther. The grass gets longer, wilder. The trees begin to lean in. You think of grandfather and his silent black bird. You look up, but see nothing but clouds. Eventually, you stop, because you don't know where to go. There are no road signs for people like you. No directions, just a horizon you can't read. Later, you return, not to surrender, but to think. People are gathered around the clearing. No more overseer. No more little black book. It lies in the dirt now, pages soggy from the rain. Someone kicked it into the mud. You watch a child step on it. No one tells them not to. The plantations don't vanish. The tools don't disappear. The heat doesn't change. But everything feels tilted now, like the rules are unspoken, unclear. The man who owned you still lives in the big house. He doesn't speak to you anymore. Just watches. He used to write down your name. Now he forgets it on purpose. Here is the bizarre detail. Some newly freed people refused to answer when called by their old names. They'd stay silent until given one of their choosing. Others walked for days just to find a priest who'd write a new name on paper, as if that act alone could scrub the past clean. You consider doing the same. You say your name aloud, not the one they gave you. The first one, the one you barely remember, but still lives in your chest like a half-beating drum. It feels strange, powerful. People start planting their own food, not just cane, cassava, okra, sorrel, things that grow without being watched. You dig into the dirt, sweat mixing with hope. For the first time, the ache in your back belongs to you. Here's the scholarly mystery. Was freedom ever really freedom? Historians debate whether post-emancipation societies truly liberated the formerly enslaved or just shifted the cage. Wages stayed low, laws stayed cruel, land stayed out of reach. But tonight, you don't care about debates. You sit by the fire with the others. You share roasted breadfruit and listen to a boy recite a story you told him years ago. He got some parts wrong. You don't correct him. It's his now. That's the point. Someone starts singing again. This time louder, not defiant, not mourning, just singing. The kind you do when there's a breeze and the moon is gentle. This is boring history for sleep, and yet this part refuses to be boring. It hums. It breathes. You lie on your back and close your eyes. No chains. No bell. Just the sound of your name, whispered by the sea. And now you rest, not in a field, not under an overseer's gaze, not with your hands curled around a blade, but here, wherever you are, wrapped in quiet. Let your shoulders drop. Feel your jaw unclench. Breathe slowly. The story you just walked through is heavy. It should be, but the weight isn't yours to carry alone. You've stepped through a world many were never meant to survive. And yet here you are, breathing softer now, blinking slower, letting the dark wrap around you like a warm quilt stitched with stars. The ghosts of the past don't ask to be remembered in textbooks. They live in lullabies. In mango, slices passed hand to hand. In a name whispered just once before sleep takes hold. So let that name settle on your tongue. Let it drift backward through time, through waves and whispers, through tangled forests and moonlit fields, until it finds a quiet place to sleep too. This was boring history for sleep, yes, but not the kind that numbs. The kind that hums gently in your ear, brushing against memory, and reminding you that even in the deepest suffering, there was rhythm, resistance, and the human need to remember. Close your eyes. Let the sugar fields fade. Let the stars return to their silent work. And if you dream tonight, may it be of soft breezes, open skies, and a world where your name was never taken. And a bit too much boiled cabbage, where your tools hang neatly on the wall, right next to a damp loaf of rye bread and a questionable jug of wine. A life where your shift begins when the rooster crows and ends when someone finally confesses to something, anything. This is boring history for sleep, but it is the kind that quietly drags you into strange corners of the past, the ones you don't usually visit, unless someone dares you. And tonight, you've chosen to live the life of a medieval torturer. You probably won't survive this, but you'll look fabulous in leather. Your name doesn't matter. No one here calls you by it, anyway. You're just the one in the basement, sometimes the hand. You're the person noblemen won't make eye contact with, and priests only acknowledge when they need something extracted. You used to be a blacksmith's apprentice, but your talent for precision and your unsettling calm led you here, to this stone room, with this heavy key in your hand. Every morning, you unlock the dungeon. The door groans like it resents you. That sound has become part of your routine now. Wake, eat, unlock, listen for echoing chains. There's always one that rattles more than the others. You start with your boots. Thick, cracked leather with one buckle missing. Then the apron. It used to be white. Now it's a patchwork of grime, dried wine, soot, and ... well. Let's call it history. Your sleeves are rolled just enough to keep them out of the way, but not enough to expose the pale marks circling your forearms. That's where the manacles used to sit, back when you were learning. Your first task is always the fire. Coals take time. You stack them carefully, using the same wood you used for your mother's stove. She never did find out where you really worked. Told her you were a clerk in the records office. Still sends bread during Lent. As the heat builds, you do your inspection. Iron hooks secure. Stretching table recently oiled. Pair of anguish where it should be. The wheel, cracked at one spoke, hums when you touch it. You make a note to fix it, not because you'll need it soon, but because tools deserve respect. That's the rule you live by. Respect the work, and it won't eat you alive. There's a prisoner scheduled today. That's what the little wooden token on your table means. It's painted red with a thumbprint in wax. Not yours. Someone upstairs. Likely the bailiff or the bishop. Could be a noble's whisper. Or a merchant with friends. Names don't matter down here. Only questions. You've learned how to ask them without words. Pressure, silence, the subtle flick of a torch flame. Sometimes it's enough to just sit across from someone with your tools out. They fill the air with everything they know, and a little extra just in case. But sometimes silence clings to the walls like mold. That's when you bring out the chair. It's not special. Wooden. Wobbles on one leg. But when you tie someone to it and angle the mirror just right so they can see their own eyes, that's when the real work begins. Fear looks different in reflection. And here's the strange part. The part you don't say out loud. Sometimes you feel sorry for them. Not often. Just in those flickers of time between questions. When someone mentions a daughter, a lost ring, or sings quietly to themselves while the chains dig in, you keep a coin in your pocket. Not for luck, but as a reminder. It's Saxon, smooth-edged, bent down the center. The man who gave it to you never broke under pressure. Not even once. Said it belonged to his mother. You couldn't make him talk, and he wouldn't let you take it. So you waited until the crows came. Then you slipped it into your pocket like it was yours all along. Outside, the world continues. Markets open. Children run past your window without looking in. No one visits this part of the castle unless they have to. Even the rats walk quietly. But you're always here. And no one asks how you sleep at night, because no one wants to know. But here's a historical wrinkle. In some regions of Europe, torturers were required to live just outside the city walls. Not for secrecy, but because their job was considered spiritually polluting. You could be paid by the town, fed by the abbey, and still forbidden from walking through the main gates. Boring history for sleep, right? But the kind that makes your dreams smell like cold iron and boiled linen. As the fire settles into a steady glow, you hear the shuffle of boots. They're bringing someone down. Probably scared. Probably innocent. Doesn't matter. The system has gears, and you are one of them. You stand, stretch your arms, and wait for the dungeon door to creak open again. It always does. You reach for the iron tongs, not because you need them right now, but because you like the weight. It steadies your hands, makes the room feel less like a whisper and more like something solid. You set them down gently on the table, beside the thumbscrews and the pricker. The pricker's newer, its wooden handle smooth from nervous palms, yours included. The thing is, most of your tools don't come with official names. You give them nicknames, quietly. You call the rack Martha, because it groans like an old aunt when in use. The iron collar that pinches the neck just so, that's the bishop, naturally. And that lovely little device with the corkscrew motion, you call it regret, because everyone who sees it has one. There's something oddly domestic about setting up your tools. It's like laying out ingredients for a recipe, if the recipe were for despair. You have a system. Hooks first, blades second, pressure implements in a line, like they're soldiers awaiting orders. The pair of anguish, that horrible thing with the blooming petals of pain, you keep tucked away. It's more symbolic than practical. Sometimes, all it takes is someone seeing it. You test each device, not out of cruelty, but because you've learned the hard way that nothing's worse than fumbling mid-session. Once, early in your career, A pulley snapped during a session with a moneylender accused of coin shaving. The whole performance collapsed into farce, and the bishop sent you home for 3 days without pay. Humiliating. Here is a bizarre historical detail to lull you further. Some medieval torturers were required by law to practice their craft on straw mannequins before being allowed to work on humans. Training dummies, complete with leather bindings and weighted limbs. You had one. Called him Thomas. He burst into flames during a misjudged application of hot irons. You still smell singed burlap sometimes, and it always makes you think of failure. The tools, though, they're the only ones who truly understand you. That sounds strange. Sure, but who else do you talk to? Certainly not the guards. They avoid eye contact. Not the priests, either. They bless the space once a year and leave quickly. Your real companions are things that can't speak back. That's the comfort. There's an item hanging from a hook you haven't used in years. A small iron spider, supposed to be attached to a chain and drop down someone's collar. Completely ineffective, but terrifying. You keep it there as a kind of joke. A reminder that fear works better than function. Now, let's talk about the bellows. Big, wooden-handled, leather-skinned bellows, the kind used in forges. You use it to coax heat into the irons, but also to create sound. That deep, slow whoosh sets a mood. People hear it from the hallway and rethink their decisions. And don't forget the cloth, not the linen one for wiping sweat or blood, but the one soaked in herbs. You place it over their mouth if you need to keep them conscious a little longer. It smells of rosemary and something else you don't name. Keeps their minds just clear enough to answer questions, but foggy enough to forget afterward. The church doesn't approve. You use it anyway. There's one tool you always dread using, the boot. It's as literal as it sounds. A wooden shell encasing the foot, into which wedges are slowly hammered. It's messy, slow, and far too effective. You used it last winter. The girl was accused of witchcraft because she had red hair and a cat. She sang while it happened. Not words, just a soft, off-key tune. You still hum it sometimes without realizing. And now, a scholarly mystery to soothe your nerves. No one really knows how widespread these torture devices were. Some were likely invented by later generations, imagined into existence by the Victorians or dramatized for effect. The Iron Maiden? Likely a myth. No evidence of its use in the Middle Ages. But here, in your dungeon, the line between reality and invention is blurry. You've seen too much to care about footnotes. As the tools warm under torchlight, you sit. The stool creaks beneath you. You sharpen a small blade, not out of necessity, but habit. A kind of meditation. Some people pray. You file edges. You remember the first time you held the pricker. Your mentor, a man with a missing thumb and too many secrets, told you it wasn't about the wound. It was about the anticipation. He said, never start with pain. Start with silence. Let the room do the talking. You followed that advice. Still do. That's why you keep a cup of water on the table. Not for them, for you. You take small sips between questions. It paces the moment. It keeps you from rushing. That cup is the most important tool of all. Outside, bells toll for noon. You rarely see the sun, but you know its habits by sound. The townspeople are heading to market. Bread is selling. Carts creak. No one knows what you're doing right now. That's part of the charm. Torturers are invisible until needed, like mold. Or confession. The tools gleam slightly now. You've polished them with care. The kind of care you once gave to your father's axe before the harvest. He would be proud of your technique. Less so of your career choice. You place the tongs back in their spot. Adjust the leather straps on the chair. Tighten one of the manacles with a smooth turn of the wrist. And then you wait. Because they'll bring someone. They always do. And you'll greet them the way you greet everyone. With a nod, a name you won't remember, and the sound of iron sliding into place. The footsteps echo long before the door opens. 3 pairs, maybe 4. One lighter than the rest, hesitant. A shuffle in the stride. Could be shackles. Could be a limp. You don't check the roster. You prefer not knowing who's next. Makes the job feel cleaner, if such a thing is possible in a room like this. The guards nod as they bring him in. Young, maybe 15. Straw-colored hair. Dirty feet. Torn tunic at once might have been green. He's trying not to cry, so of course, he's already halfway there. They say he stole bread, though someone else whispered something about church candles and the word devil. You don't ask. You just motion toward the chair. He hesitates. Most do. The chair isn't especially threatening on its own, but the way you angle the torchlight, it casts his own shadow back at him. Makes his own fear taller, wider, harder to ignore. He sits. You tie him gently. It matters. The first contact sets the tone. Not too tight, not yet. You reach for the cup of water and sip slowly. Let silence stretch out long enough that his breathing becomes the loudest thing in the room. Then you speak. Name. He answers with a stutter. Then another. Finally, a name. Jorik. You nod. Tuck it away in your mind where it'll sit for maybe 2 hours, then vanish. You ask nothing else. Not yet. You just wait. The fire crackles. The iron tick of the pulley near the wall clicks once, then stops. You didn't touch it. Jorik starts talking. Not about the bread, but about his mother. She's ill. He was only trying to get her something warm. A heel of rye. A bit of stew from the baker's window. He didn't take anything, he swears. He's shaking. You haven't moved. Here's something most people don't know. A good torturer almost never uses tools. At least, not right away. The weight of anticipation, the scent of hot iron in the air, the echo of chains on stone. It's enough. That's the art of it. The conversation before the pain. You pick up a small rod, nothing sharp. Just a piece of iron with a rounded edge. You turn it in your hand slowly, like a craftsman inspecting his work. His eyes follow it, then dark to your face, then to the ground. You watch where they settle. Always a clue. Jorik blurts out something about a priest, not the one from town. A visiting one. Said strange things. Asked questions about herbs. He saw Jorik and his mother outside the graveyard one night. Something about candles and a fox's skull. You say nothing. This is where the rhythm lives, in not reacting. You let the silence bloom between his words. He fills it, one guilty syllable at a time. You don't know if any of it is true. Doesn't really matter. You're not a judge. You're a lever. You press, and confessions come out. And now, for your bizarre bedtime detail. In parts of medieval Germany, torturers were required to serve breakfast to prisoners after a session. Not out of kindness, but because a fed man was considered more truthful. A starving one might say anything to get out of the straps. You've served cold porridge to murderers, stew to heretics, and once, honey bread to a man who swore he could speak to wolves. He cried when he ate it. You reach for a piece of linen and dab the boy's forehead, not to be gentle, to distract him. While his mind's on the cloth, you tighten one strap. He doesn't even notice. He talks more, about dreams, about voices, about how he saw smoke rising from the altar during Mass when no one else did, about how the priest said that meant he had the gift. You pause. There's debate about this in the higher circles. Visions, apparitions, are they divine or dangerous? The church likes to keep its miracles tidy. Anything extra is suspect, especially from boys with nothing but fever and desperation in their eyes. You glance at the tools. You don't need them. You lean in, quiet now. Ask him a single question. Did he ever use the gift? His eyes go wide. You already know the answer. And now, A scholarly debate to drift into. There is little agreement on whether torture consistently produced truthful confessions. Many medieval jurists argued that anything said under pain was tainted. Others believed the body couldn't lie when the soul was pressed. Your job, caught somewhere between the two, is to listen for cracks, not just in bone, but in logic. Jorah keeps talking. He saw a man in the woods, he says, face covered in moss. Spoke without moving his mouth. Asked him to bury a coin under his mother's pillow. She stopped coughing after that. You blink. The moss. You've heard that before. A woman last autumn claimed her fever broke after hearing laughter from a tree trunk. You thought it nonsense. But here it is again. Different voice. Different sickness. Same moss. You wonder, just for a second, if something's growing out there. Not superstition. Something older. You stand. Untie Jorah. He flinches, but doesn't move. You tell him to wait. You step outside. The guard raises an eyebrow. You shake your head. Not yet. You sit beside the fire again. The boy watches you warily. You still hungry? You ask. He nods. You toss him a hunk of bread from your table. It's hard, stale, but edible. He eats it in silence, wiping his mouth on his sleeve. You've already decided. You'll write a report. Say he was too weak. Say he spoke nonsense. Say it all pointed nowhere. Sometimes mercy feels heavier than steel. You turn away, and for a brief moment, his reflection catches in the iron blade. He's smiling. That's the part you won't write down. The next morning, you're summoned early. Not by a guard, not by a priest, but by the steward of the Duke's court himself, wearing silk so clean it almost feels like an insult down here. He holds the summons like it smells bad, even though the parchment's still warm from the scribe's desk. There's a crowd expected today. You sigh. Public demonstration. You've never liked these. Torture works best in quiet spaces, where the air doesn't taste like roasted almonds and gossip. But the Duke is hosting guests, nobles, traders, one minor cardinal who likes to drink red wine from a black goblet. And what better way to impress than a spectacle of justice? You prepare the same way you always do. Warm the irons. Lay out the instruments. Choose ones that gleam. The wheel isn't quite fixed yet, but it'll turn well enough for show. You set out the branding rod with the town as crest, more for intimidation than actual use. Most people scream before it even touches them. This time, it's not some scrawny-bred thief. The man they bring in is tall, well-fed, with a beard that suggests he owns at least 3 goats. Accused of heresy, or sedition, or both, depending on which version of the story made it upstairs. He walks in like he's above the whole thing, eyes calm, shoulders squared. You already hate him. The square is already buzzing. A wooden platform creaks in the morning sun. Ropes hang neatly from hooks. The townspeople cluster in, half shielding their children, the other half hoisting them onto shoulders. Merchants hawk meat pies. Somewhere, a lute plays. You walk onto the platform. The man is strapped in place. Not cruelly, yet. Just enough to remind him who holds the screws. You scan the crowd. The bishop sits near the front, hiding behind his prayers. A duke lounges under a striped canopy. He lifts his goblet as if to toast. You do not toast back. You begin. There's no script. Just the rhythm you've built over years. Start with a question. Let silence answer. Let the crowd lean in. Then gesture toward the tools. Make it slow. The pricker, the clamps, the wheel. Name them aloud. The names don't matter. The tone does. You touch the man's shoulder gently. The crowd murmurs. Here's a twisted bit of trivia to lull you. In medieval France, there were laws governing how much an audience could enjoy a public torture. Laughing too loud could be considered disrespectful to the church. But if you didn't watch closely enough, that might look like sympathy. It was a delicate dance. A theater of eyes. You ask the man about the letters. He denies them. The ones found in his home, folded neatly beside a broken rosary. He says they're poems. You ask about the ink. It's foreign, imported. He says a monk gave it to him. He sweats, but he doesn't shake. So you tighten the ropes. Not much, just enough to shift his weight. He exhales sharply. The crowd hushes. You glance at the cardinal. He's chewing a fig and watching with the lazy focus of a cat watching a mouse dream. You circle the platform once. Let the creaking wood fill the space between lies. You pick up the rod. Let it catch the sunlight. Then you do nothing with it. Just set it back down. That's when the man cracks. Not a confession. Not yet. But he blinks too fast, swallows too hard. His mind is working against him now, filling in blanks that haven't even been drawn yet. You whisper something no one else can hear. He starts to speak. Names, places, rivers. A coded language that doesn't make sense. The crowd leans in as if they're reading it like a play. As if it matters to them. As if they're a part of the justice. That's the lie of this whole thing. Justice isn't what they came for. They came for certainty. For the illusion that evil can be pointed at, punished, and erased with enough pain. They came for closure. You came for truth. You rarely get either. The man keeps talking. He's weeping now. Not from pain, but shame. It happens sometimes. The moment the body realizes it betrayed the soul, you listen, nodding slowly. You don't write anything down. Someone else will do that later, and likely get half of it wrong. You finish by untying the man. He can't stand, so the guards carry him. The crowd claps, unsure why. A child screams at the sight of blood on your apron. You don't flinch. You walk off stage, past the merchant selling roasted chestnuts, and the nun who turns her face away like you re something unclean. Here's your scholarly mystery for the night. Was any of this real? Many historians now argue that the so-called public tortures were less about investigation and more about theater. Symbolic, controlled, a spectacle for power, not justice. In some records, the entire confessions were pre-written, rehearsed. A medieval pantomime with iron props. You sit in your chamber later, peeling off the leather gloves. Your hands hurt, not from the work, from the holding back. The tools rest quietly. You hang them one by one, listening to the soft clinks as they return to their pegs. They've done their part. The crowd got their show. The Duke got his power play. And you got another day deeper into the role you never asked for. You sit in silence, then you hum. A slow, off-key tune. The same one the red-haired girl sang while the boot crushed her foot. The crowd cheered that day, too. You don't work Sundays. Not because of the Lord's commandment, but because the chapel above your quarters smells like old cheese on holy days, and the bishop gets twitchy when he hears hammering beneath his altar. He says it distracts from the incense, so you sleep in. At least you try. The bells start before dawn. First, a single low note that makes the rats pause. Then a second, higher, sharper, like someone testing the tension in a wire. It's not a call to prayer. It's a warning. A noble has died. You feel it in your bones before the messenger even arrives. She knocks twice. You pretend not to hear. She opens the door anyway. She's small, fast, and smells of parchment and lamp oil. Probably sleeps in the scribe's corner, curled like a cat. They need the room prepared. You groan and reach for your cloak. No time for bread. Again, this one's special. A secret interrogation. Not even the guards are allowed in. The room must be silent, the floor swept, and the candlelight just right. You get to work. You dust the table. Arrange the shackles to look accidental. Angle the torchlight to fall across the subject's left eye. No idea who it is yet. Only that they're important enough to use the inner chamber. You haven't used that room in weeks. Now, for your historical fact, many medieval torture chambers had hidden listening holes built into their walls. Not just for security, for entertainment. Sometimes the priest or the steward would listen in, deciding guilt based not on evidence, but on how someone screamed. You clean out the funnel. Not for water, for wine. Today's visitor has expensive taste. The bishop insists the interrogations remain dignified. You laugh, but quietly. When the subject arrives, you recognize him. Not his name, but the smell. Lavender soap and something sour underneath. A clerk from the monastery. The one who always bowed too low and smiled too wide. He's shaking now. You don't ask why he's here. You never do. But this time, he offers it freely. I know where the relics are, he whispers. You sit. He starts talking. Relics stolen, sold to merchants. Hidden beneath floorboards and in hollowed-out hymnals. One was baked into a wheel of cheese to smuggle it past the city wall. That one made it to Italy. Probably melted somewhere near Pisa. This, you think, is actually interesting. You ask him where the last one is. He hesitates. Then lies. You feel it in your spine. You've been lied to so many times, you've developed a sort of internal bell. It chimes now. So you reach for something theatrical. The Iron Maiden. Now, let's get something straight. It's probably fake. At least, the version you've got is a reproduction. A gift from a visiting Saxon lord who thought you'd enjoy the irony. Hinged doors. Hollow spikes. Looks impressive. Doesn't really do much except scare people. Perfect. You don't even open it. Just walk over to it, trailing your fingers along the edge. The man goes quiet. I'm telling you the truth, he says. You press a hand to the cool metal of the maiden. Look back. No, you say. You're not. He weeps. You don't move. Eventually, he caves. The last relic, a saint's finger, is in the bishop's quarters, hidden in the base of his prayer stool. The clerk had planned to steal it, but got caught first. You lean back and blink slowly. The bishop, huh? Here as a little-known footnote of boring history for sleep. It wasn't uncommon for church officials to stage their own thefts. It let them move relics without papal permission or inflate their value. Some even blamed Jews or heretics just to justify new taxes. The relic game was less about faith, more about business. You release the clerk. Say nothing. Write nothing. Just tell him to leave. Then you sit there, staring at the Iron Maiden. It's decorative, useless, empty, like the rituals upstairs. The bishop's chants. The veiled threats in Latin. You think about the red-haired girl again. About Jorik. About moss and fox skulls and the humming of the cracked wheel in the corner. You think about quitting, but then you hear the outer door open. Boots. Another messenger. They need you again. Of course they do. You blow out the candles, close the maiden, hang your tools. Then you step into the hallway, where the bishop passes you without a glance. He smells like lavender. You smile. The saint's finger is still under his stool. For now. They stop calling for you as often. Not suddenly. Not all at once. But the silence starts to stretch between assignments, like the pause between chimes of a broken bell. A week passes, then two. The outer guards don't nod as deeply when you pass. The baker doesn't send bread anymore. One day, you come down to the chamber and find your rack dismantled. Not destroyed, just repurposed. The wooden frame now supports sacks of barley. A coil of rope leans against the wall where the clamps used to hang. Even Martha, your old rack, your oldest companion, has been reduced to a plank and a rusted wheel. The name you carved into her leg scrub it clean. No one tells you you're finished. They never do. But the message arrives in other ways. Fewer prisoners. Fewer whispers. One afternoon, you see the steward training a younger man. Pale, jittery, too eager. He laughs nervously, as the steward points at the pulley. You wonder how long you'll last. Your hands hurt now, not from holding back, from holding anything at all. The joints swell when it rains. The tips go numb when you try to sew, something you picked up recently. Mending your own socks seemed like a noble act until you jabbed your thumb one too many times. You don't live in the city walls anymore. You've been given a cottage near the river, close enough to hear the bells, far enough to pretend they're meant for someone else. The church says it's an honor, a reward for faithful service. You know better. It's distance. It's quiet exile. Let me give you one last boring history for sleep fact. In some parts of Europe, torturers were buried in unmarked graves, even when they died in service to the crown. Not because they were criminals, but because their work blurred the boundary between justice and sin. That's how the records phrased it. Blurred. You think about that as you chop wood with your left hand. The right doesn't close properly anymore. The axe is dull. You don't bother sharpening it. The work takes longer, but you're not in a hurry. No one's waiting. Your dreams are louder now. Not nightmares. Not quite. More like echoes. Chains that rattle just out of reach. The creak of rope. The whisper of a boy singing off key. You wake up one morning with blood on your lip and don't know why. Some days you walk into the woods behind the cottage, just far enough to feel the quiet. There's a tree stump there that's always warm, even in winter. Moss grows thick at its base, and once, just once, you think you hear a voice. Leave it, it says. You do. The bishop visits you once, brings wine and a small loaf of almond cake, says your work was of great service to the truth. You say nothing. He doesn't stay long. After he leaves, you find a relic under your floorboards, wrapped in linen, still faintly glowing. A finger bone, likely. You don't remember putting it there. You bury it near the tree stump, not out of guilt, just habit. The new torturer sends a letter, asks for advice. You burn it without reading. You have no advice, only memories. And here's your final scholarly debate. Historians still argue over the legacy of people like you. Were torturers state functionaries or monsters? Victims of their time or villains in disguise? You don't care. You never did. You were a cog in a wheel that kept turning long before you arrived. It turned still with new faces, new tools, new truths. You walk slower now, with a limp, an old wound that never healed right. You tell people it was a fall from a horse. Let them believe it. No one really wants to know. On your last evening, you sit by the river and listen to the frogs. The water is low. The stars are sharp. For the first time in years, your hands are still. You close your eyes and hum. Same tune. Always the same. Now, just let everything settle. Let the sounds fade, like the final creak of a wooden beam after years of holding weight. Let the dust drift through that old chamber one last time. Dancing in the torchlight you no longer need to tend. You're far from there now. Far from the damp stone walls and the scent of iron. Far from whispered confessions and faces that never quite left your memory. You're not that person anymore. Out here, the nights are slower. The stars don't watch you with judgment, and the wind has no questions. It just moves through the trees, carrying the sighs of things left behind. You walk differently now, each step more deliberate, less like survival, more like choice. The tools are gone, the roles too. What's left is you, just a name whispered once in a record no one reads. A quiet figure sitting by a cold riverbank, humming to frogs that don't ask what you did. And that's all right. That's how it ends, not with justice or punishment, but with stillness, with worn hands resting in your lap, with sleep that comes not from exhaustion, but permission. You've done enough. Now rest. You're safe. Next bedtime story might make you squint into the darkness and wonder how a silk robe could weigh more than a chain. You're about to become a concubine not by choice, not quite by force either. It's a life shaped by glances, decided in halls you never even knew existed. Now, before you slip into this strange dream, quick pause if you enjoy these sleepy stories. A like and sub go a long way. But only if you really mean it. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I'm always curious which corners of the world need boring history for sleep. You're 12, maybe 13. Your hands are rough from washing rice husks, and you've never worn shoes that actually fit. But one morning, your father returns from town walking slower than usual, holding a scroll like it might explode. The Emperor's men have seen you. They liked what they saw. You've been selected. That's the word they use. There's no discussion. Your mother combs your hair without speaking, braiding it tight until your scalp stings. She ties a red ribbon at the end and hands you a tiny linen pouch with a few silver coins and a shin-sized jade trinket that belonged to her mother. You won't see her again. Your journey begins in an ox-drawn carriage that smells like lacquer and old sweat. The other girls don't speak. One cries silently, eyes fixed on a crack in the wood. You all pretend not to notice. By the time you reach the outer gates of the palace, the silence has hardened into something you wear, like a second skin. Inside the palace walls, time bends. Your name is stripped first. You're given a new one, something delicate and vague. Spring orchid, or moon petal. You stop being a person and start being an idea. Training begins immediately. Posture, speech, stillness. There, as a man with no beard and a voice like a flute who corrects how you breathe. You're told to speak only when spoken to, and even then, gently. Too sharp a tone, and you might be assigned to kitchen duty for a month, or worse, forgotten entirely. The palace is a world of invisible lines. You learn where you may walk, and where you must not. You don't open doors. You wait, always wait. If someone important approaches, you kneel, even if your knees are already raw, especially then. At night, you're allowed to rest in shared quarters, 10 girls to a room, with sheets too clean to feel real. You lie awake, eyes on the paper ceiling, tracing the flicker of candlelight through its seams. You hear whispers in the dark. Who was dismissed today? Who is summoned? Who is gone? No one says where gone is. You find that food here is strange, not bad, just designed for appearance, not for hunger. Sliced lotus root arranged like fans. Dumplings the size of a fingernail. No garlic, no onions. You must never smell. The idea of being a person with bodily needs is offensive. You're meant to float. Your first real test comes one afternoon when the first eunuch appears during tea practice. He watches you pour without blinking. When you accidentally clink the lid against the teacup, he doesn't scold you. He just walks away. That's worse. 2 days later, you're made to serve in the outer garden, away from the central chamber. No explanation, just distance, a soft exile. But you learn. You learn to move like mist. By your 16th birthday, your hands no longer tremble when you dress yourself in layered silk. You know which hairpins suggest elegance and which ones scream desperation. You thus stopped asking what happened to that girl with the crooked smile who used to sleep beside you. She's probably fine, somewhere. One afternoon, the Empress herself passes by. She doesn't look at you, but her parrot does. It tilts its head, then squawks. Pretty little shadow. That evening, your slippers are replaced with a more ornate pair. Someone has noticed. And then there's the strange detail that no one prepares you for. The bells. Every concubine wears tiny bells stitched into the hem of her robe. The sound you make when you walk isn't yours. It's curated, musical. The emperor supposedly likes to hear the approach of beauty. Some say it started because one of his favorites once tried to sneak away. Others say it helps him find the right girl in the dark. Either way, your steps now have a soundtrack. The real oddity, though, you're not even officially a concubine yet. You're a potential, a maybe, a whisper of a future pleasure. And even now, the court scholars argue over how much influence women like you actually had. Were you mere decoration? Or silent strategists behind veils and fans? It depends who writes the history. But here, inside these walls, you feel the tension. Every moment is thick with performance. You're never alone, yet always lonely. And that, perhaps, is the most accurate definition of a concubine. The art of being seen, but never truly known. Still, in the silence of your chamber, beneath the soft rustle of silk and the distant echo of court flutes, you begin to wonder, what happens when beauty fades? What happens when the emperor looks at someone else? But you already know. You just don't say it out loud. The first time they dress you in the real robes, the official ones, you feel like you're being buried alive in silk. There's no ceremony, no music, no applause. Just a quiet assistant who doesn't look you in the eye, her fingers swift and cold, tightening layer after layer until your arms barely move. The robe is pale green with gold thread and embroidered cranes. It's the color of river water under sunlight, but it feels more like armor, not the kind that protects, the kind that tells everyone you're owned. It's a curious contradiction. Everything you wear now is meant to express grace and delicacy, yet it functions more like a cage. The sleeves alone could trip you if you walked too quickly. Your hair, once a simple braid, is now lacquered into loops and coils held in place by pins heavier than you'd imagined. One of them bears a miniature jade cicada. When you ask what it means, the maid says it sings in silence and then tells you never to touch it. They say the emperor loves elegance. But you're beginning to suspect he just hates reality. Every garment is designed not for comfort, but for spectacle. There's an inner robe, an outer robe, and a sleeveless vest that only exists to show off the embroidery on the back. And the shoes. Tiny silk slippers, curved like crescent moons, stuffed with cotton, so your feet slide forward with every step. It's meant to make your gait delicate, fragile, like you might tip over at any moment. Sometimes you think about running, but then you remember the gates, the guards, the rules you've memorized by heart. And the bells sewn into your hems would betray you before your first footfall. Still, there's power in the costume. You catch glimpses of yourself in the polished copper mirror and barely recognize the girl staring back. She looks important, like someone worth protecting. Or maybe possessing. You're not sure which is more dangerous. By now you've picked up on a strange detail. The colors you wear aren't just aesthetic. They're a ranking system. Pale blues and greens for new arrivals. Deeper shades for those who've caught the emperor's eye. Only one woman wears red. She doesn't speak to anyone. No one speaks to her. You try not to envy her. One evening, a senior concubine, Lady Zhao, summons you to her room. She's older, poised, with fingers like bone, and a laugh that never touches her eyes. She watches you for a long time, then says, "You blink too much. It makes you look uncertain." You nod, unsure what else to do. "Better," she smirks. She teaches you how to pour wine without spilling, how to hold a fan like it's part of your hand, and most importantly, how to cry without ruining your coal. Always cry down, not out. Tilt your face slightly. Let it look poetic. You want to ask her if she remembers what it was like before all this. But the question dies in your throat. You already know the answer. Memory doesn't survive long here. Only performance does. Each morning, you're inspected. A unit checks your appearance, your posture, the scent of your breath. If you pass, you're allowed into the orchid pavilion, where the emperor sometimes strolls. If not, you return to your room, untouched, unnoticed, slowly vanishing in a place built entirely on being seen. You begin to understand something important. Invisibility is not safety. It's doom. The forgotten concubines are still here, technically. You see them in the garden, feeding the koi, hands trembling from years of stillness. They wear robes so faded, you can't tell what rank they used to be. They walk slowly, with measured grace, as if their bodies still remember what it meant to matter. There's one, in particular, who hums, always the same tune. No one knows her name. They call her the Lotus Ghost. Some say she was once the emperor's favorite. Others claim she tried to poison herself, but failed. She's beautiful still, in a cracked porcelain way. And when she looks at you, you feel like she sees straight through your robe and into the girl you used to be. You try not to let her see your fear. Now here's something scholars still debate. Were concubines political pawns or private pleasures? The answer is both. Some were daughters of powerful ministers, gifted as offerings. Others, like you, were plucked from obscurity and molded into living art. It depends on what the emperor wants to surround himself with: beauty, loyalty, silence, or maybe all three. But it's not all grim. Sometimes you laugh. Usually at night, when the lights are dim, and someone does a cruel impression of a high-ranking lady tripping over her shoes. The laughter is sharp and fast, like it's afraid to linger. Still, it's real. And that's rare here. You're allowed to write poetry. Encouraged even. But only on certain topics. Nature, dreams, love in the vaguest possible terms. One of your verses is praised by the calligraphy master. He says you have a soft voice. You want to tell him your voice used to be loud, that you used to sing while fetching water. Instead, you nod and thank him. There's a kind of discipline in forgetting who you were, a peace almost. But late at night, in the quiet, you sometimes whisper your old name into your sleeve, just to make sure it still exists. And that robe, the one with the cranes, it's too beautiful to hate, even if it's a prison. You stroke the embroidery sometimes and wonder if the birds know they'll never fly. They tell you the emperor is a mountain, solid, unmovable, distant. But that's not true. He's weather. He shifts. He storms. He shines. Sometimes he doesn't show up at all. You learn this the hard way, standing in the hallway outside the Hall of Radiant Harmony, where all the maybes like you wait. You're dressed, powdered, perfumed. You've practiced the bow that reveals just enough of your wrist to suggest elegance without forwardness. You've been standing for hours. Then a steward whispers, "He's gone to the music girls tonight." And just like that, the evening is over. You return to your room, your slippers silent on the stone, and sleep in full makeup because it hurts less than washing your face in tears. There's a rhythm to the way you begin to survive. Reading the shadows, counting sighs, analyzing the tilt of his head during morning court to guess whether he'll want company by dusk. You become fluent in moods that aren't yours. The way his voice tightens after he speaks with the northern generals. The way he taps the jade ring on his finger when he's annoyed. The way he smiles not warmly, but out of habit when he's trying to remember your name. Most of the time, he doesn't. But when he does, it feels like the sun looked right at you. Tonight, you're assigned to the candle room. You didn't know this place existed until now. It's just outside his private study. Your job is to sit and copy poems into neat scrolls by candlelight, in case he wishes to glance at something inspiring during one of his brooding moods. You're not alone. Another concubine sits across from you, peach cloud, a quiet girl with long fingers and a whispery voice. She doesn't speak until hours have passed and your wrists ache. Then she says, "He only likes sad poems. Joy makes him nervous." You file that away. It's useful. This is where the real game is played, not in bedrooms, but in margins, in observations, in knowing the right thing to say when asked nothing at all. You get better at it. You start learning which concubines are really rivals and which are simply furniture. Some have no interest in the emperor. They're here because their families want influence, or because there was nowhere else for them to go. Others are ambitious in quiet, terrifying ways. One of them, Lady Hong, leaves small offerings at the base of the plum tree in the courtyard. You don't ask what they are? The tree blooms early that year. You've begun to understand the language of gifts. A carved cone left on your cushion might be a peace offering or a warning. A silk sash placed just slightly off-center on the wardrobe shelf could mean someone has entered your room. The messages are never written, only implied. You learn to read gestures the way poets read wind, and still you wait. Until one night, a change. The steward doesn't say your name. He gestures. You follow. The path to the emperor's chamber is oddly quiet. No guards. No music. Just the muffled sound of your own blood in your ears. You think of all the stories whispered in the dark. Girls who never came back. Girls who were sent away after one clumsy word. Girls who rose to the top and fell harder than anyone. When the door opens, the room inside is not what you expected. It's warm, lit by low lamps. There's a bowl of sweet pears on the table, and a soft melody played by unseen musicians drifting in from behind a curtain. He's sitting on a cushioned dais, reading. He doesn't look up immediately. You bow. He still doesn't speak. Finally, he says, "Come closer." His voice is soft, not kind exactly. Just used to being obeyed. You sit, not too close. You fold your hands in your lap. You wait. He asks where you're from. You lie, because you were told to. He nods. He doesn't care. Then he recites a poem, not his own. One of the ones you copied, badly, weeks ago. You smile. He frowns. You stop smiling. He doesn't touch you. He just talks. About stars. About a dream he had where he was drowning in petals. About how he sometimes wishes he'd been born a farmer. You nod when appropriate, ask careful questions, respond like a mirror. He looks at you like you might be human. And then you're dismissed. No touch. No kiss. Not even a glance as you leave. But the next morning, your name is moved up the list. Suddenly, you're invited to the tea ceremony. You're assigned a better room, with a screen painted with cranes in flight. The robe you wear is now a shade deeper than before, and the other girls look at you differently. Now here's the odd part. There's no guarantee this means anything. Sometimes the emperor simply enjoys variety. Sometimes he's testing personalities. And sometimes, as you'll come to suspect, he doesn't even remember who he saw the night before. The historians say concubines were vessels of beauty and grace, part of the harmony of the court. But they rarely mention the chaos, the guessing, the way you become an expert in interpreting half-finished sentences and unfinished tea. Even now, years later, you'll remember that night, more for what didn't happen than what did. The conversation, the flicker of uncertainty in his voice when he mentioned his dreams, the feeling that, for a moment, you were seen not as a role, but as a person, even if it didn't last, even if it was a lie. You're no longer one of the invisible ones, not quite a favorite, but no longer the background. You exist now in that shimmering middle ground where the stakes are highest. The cranes embroidered on your new robe are flying, not standing. That means something. People notice. And when people notice, they whisper. They say the emperor smiled at you twice in one afternoon, that he called you by name without pausing to remember, that the tea you poured last week was his favorite blend, though you were fairly certain he didn't even drink it. Whispers spread fast in the palace, like ink spilled on silk, and just as impossible to clean up. You start getting gifts, nothing extravagant. A ribbon in the right color, a fruit from the imperial orchard, a bracelet made of pearls so small they look like dew, but every gift means something. It is either a message from someone higher up or a warning from someone you've had just outranked. One morning, a maid named Yushi leaves a chrysanthemum on your vanity table. Yellow. A subtle reminder. Do not trust anyone who smiles too much. She doesn't say that out loud, but you understand. That's the language now. Flowers mean more than words. Then come the cranes, real ones. The emperor's aviary is hidden behind a curved wall covered in creeping wisteria. You didn't know it existed until your name appears on the daily assignment scroll, next to the words, garden accompaniment. You assume it's a mistake. It's not. You're led to the aviary just before dusk, when the light softens and the scent of jasmine is thick in the air. The emperor stands by a shallow pond, throwing bits of something into the water. Two cranes watch him, perfectly still. You don't speak until he nods. He gestures at one of the birds. This one bites, he says. You don't move. He laughs. I like the ones that are difficult. You're unsure if he means you, or the bird, or both. That evening, he lets you walk beside him. Not behind, beside. You count that as a victory, though you never tell anyone. It would sound like boasting. And in the palace, boasting is a short path to exile. That night, there's soup in your chamber. Golden broth with chrysanthemum petals floating like forgotten words. You hesitate. The color is off. Just slightly, like a shade too bright to be natural. You don't drink it. The next morning, one of the younger concubines is gone. Her room is scrubbed clean before breakfast. Her name removed from the list. No ceremony, no explanation. Yushi leaves a new flower by your door. This one is wilted. You were supposed to be careful. You don't speak to her for 3 days. Now, here is the mystery the scholars can't quite solve. How often were concubines eliminated by each other? And how often was it simply the emperor's changing whims? The records are vague. Names disappear without context. Illness is blamed for everything, even when the symptoms are too sudden, too specific, too targeted. It's safer not to ask. You begin testing your meals. A tiny sip, a pause. Watch the maid's reaction. Wait. Most of the time, it's fine. But once, after a breakfast of rice porridge and salted plum, you feel dizzy. Just enough to make you wonder. The emperor doesn't notice. Or he pretends not to. He's distracted these days. Preoccupied. He talks about dreams again. About birds flying over burning cities. You offer a poem. He nods, says nothing. You're summoned less frequently now, but each visit feels heavier. There's a pressure behind his gaze. Like he's trying to decide something and hasn't yet figured out what. You stop guessing. The older concubines watch you closely. Lady Zhao speaks to you in riddles. When the wind stops moving, the curtain falls flat, she says, one morning over tea. You nod politely, unsure if it's a warning or a metaphor for your posture. Peach Cloud still quiet, still soft brushes your sleeve one evening and whispers, "Don't win, just don't lose." Then she disappears down the hallway before you can respond. You're starting to realize the real art of survival here isn't charm or beauty. It's ambiguity. Not being too anything. Not too eager, not too indifferent. You must always be something that can be interpreted a dozen ways, and never clearly enough to draw a target. You stop wearing your favorite hairpin. It drew compliments. You stop writing poems in your own voice. They were starting to sound too personal. You learn to blur. Yet still, the soup comes. Sometimes clear, sometimes thick, sometimes redder than you'd like. You never drink it. You pour it into the soil beneath your window. The roots there grow unnaturally fast. You don't think about it. One evening, you find a bird feather tucked into your pillow. It's from the crane who bites. You burn it without hesitation. That night, you dream of walking barefoot through the aviary, the cranes all watching, motionless. When you wake, your slippers are turned the wrong direction. You didn't leave them that way. This is the part of palace life no one outside writes about. The slow unraveling. Not from fear, but from not knowing who wants you to disappear. Historians focus on the splendor, the brocaded robes, the moonlit gardens. They forget the fear that lives in your stomach like a second heart. You start wearing simpler robes again. Blues, greens, nothing that suggests ambition. You smile less, bow a little deeper. You retreat just enough to remind the court that you are gracefully forgettable. And it works. For now. The summons comes folded in silk. No sound, no preamble. Just a maid kneeling outside your chamber with a sealed slip of paper and eyes that don't quite meet yours. You already know what it means before you even unfold it. Your name has been written in cinnabar ink. That's how they do it when the emperor chooses you not for a stroll, not for conversation, but for the bedchamber. You were warned once by an older girl. The golden bed isn't warm, she said. It just looks like it should be. You didn't believe her then. You do now. You don't dress yourself. That's not allowed. 2 attendants do it for you, pulling each layer tight with practiced indifference. They rub your skin with jasmine oil, dust your shoulders with crushed pearl. The robe they give you is lighter than usual, sheer in a way that makes you cold even before you leave the room. You aren't allowed to speak unless addressed. You aren't allowed to make noise when you walk. You aren't allowed to bring anything of your own, not even your thoughts. The hallway to the emperor's private chamber is long and silent, flanked by flickering lamps that cast thin shadows like grasping hands. The floor is smooth and cold beneath your slippers. At the end of it, you pause before the screen with the golden dragons. You've seen this place from a distance before. Never this close. A eunuch opens the door without speaking. Inside, the room smells of incense and old cedar. There are no guards here, no noise from the rest of the palace. Only the rustle of fabric and the faint click of the emperor's fingernail tapping against a jade cup. He's already seated on the dais, dressed not in robes of power, but something simpler. His face is unreadable. He gestures for you to approach. You do. You kneel. He watches you for a while, as if studying a painting he's seen before, but forgotten the name of. Then he says, "You look tired." You don't answer. He waves a hand, and the eunuch leaves. You rise and step forward. The golden bed isn't gold. Not exactly. It's a polished wood frame wrapped in silk dyed with powdered chrysanthemum. In the low candlelight, it gleams like metal, but it feels like stone. The sheets are cool, the silence colder. He doesn't ask your name. He doesn't ask anything. The act itself is neither cruel nor kind. It's a ritual, a task. You feel more like a vessel than a person, like you're there to absorb something and carry it away, though you're not sure what. Afterward, he turns away, says nothing. The silence presses into your ribs. You lie still, uncertain whether you're allowed to breathe yet. Eventually, he speaks. Do you think the cranes miss the sky? You don't know how to answer. I don't, he continues. I think they forget, just like we do. You nod, even though he's not looking at you. He falls asleep before you leave. You dress yourself this time. Outside the chamber, the air's too bright, too real. You blink against it, suddenly aware that the night is still going. The world hasn't paused for your transformation. You return to your room. There's a box on your pillow. Inside is a comb inlaid with mother of pearl and a single hairpin carved in the shape of a plum blossom. And you know what this means. You are now officially a favored concubine. Your name is etched into the bamboo scroll that records the nightly order. Your meals are delivered earlier, hotter, with sweeter fruits and softer rice. The guards at the gate bow slightly lower when you pass. The other girls notice. Lady Zhao stops speaking to you. Peach Cloud keeps her distance. Even the lotus ghost hums a different tune now. But it's not just them. You start noticing it too. You're summoned more often. You stop sleeping through the night, waiting instead for the sound of footsteps outside your door. Every creak, every whisper jolts you awake. You lose track of the days. The robe you once admired begins to feel tight at the collar. You're invited to more private dinners now, ones with the Empress present. She smiles too politely, asks you about poetry, offers you wine. The conversation never touches your actual life. You don't know what she's thinking, and that terrifies you more than any of the others. One afternoon, she invites you to sit in her pavilion. You sip tea. She plays the zither. She pauses and says, "Do you enjoy your position?" You know it's not a real question. You say, "It is an honor." She nods. Then very quietly, she says, "Don't get used to it." You don't ask what she means. You already know. Now here's the historical debate. Was being a favored concubine a blessing or a trap? Some sources describe lavish gifts, influence, even love. Others imply isolation, constant scrutiny, and the ever-present threat of replacement. The truth is likely both. Because now that you've risen, there's only one direction left to fall. And the golden bed? It hasn't gotten any warmer. It comes quietly. No bells, no fireworks, no sudden lifting of chains. Just a murmur that spreads from mouth to mouth, hut to hut. Someone says the king across the sea signed something. Someone else swears a man in the big house read a letter with a trembling hand. You don't believe it at first. Most don't. You've lived too many lies in the heat to trust something delivered on paper. Still, the next morning, something's different. There's no pot banging, no barked orders, no overseer at the gate. You wait. 10 minutes. 20. Then someone, an old woman with a long scar down her arm, walks out of the yard with her head high and her basket empty. No one stops her. That's when the others begin to move. Not all at once. Slowly. Cautiously. You stand too. Your legs are ready, even if your mind isn't. This is what freedom looks like. You expected more noise. Here's your core historical fact. Emancipation came in waves, across countries and years. In some colonies, it was declared overnight. In others, enslaved people were forced to serve apprenticeships after freedom. An insult dressed as policy. A leash made of paper. You walk past the edge of the field. No one stops you. You walk farther. The grass gets longer, wilder. The trees begin to lean in. You think of grandfather and his silent blackbird. You look up, but see nothing but clouds. Eventually, you stop, because you don't know where to go. There are no road signs for people like you. No directions, just a horizon you can't read. Later, you return. Not to surrender, but to think. People are gathered around the clearing. No more overseer, no more little black book. It lies in the dirt now, pages soggy from the rain. Someone kicked it into the mud. You watch a child step on it. No one tells them not to. The plantations don't vanish. The tools don't disappear. The heat doesn't change, but everything feels tilted now. Like the rules are unspoken, unclear. The man who owned you still lives in the big house. He doesn't speak to you anymore. Just watches. He used to write down your name. Now he forgets it on purpose. Here is the bizarre detail. Some newly freed people refused to answer when called by their old names. They'd stay silent until given one of their choosing. Others walked for days just to find a priest who'd write a new name on paper, as if that act alone could scrub the past clean. You consider doing the same. You say your name aloud. Not the one they gave you. The first one. The one you barely remember, but still lives in your chest like a half-beating drum. It feels strange, powerful. People start planting their own food. Not just cane, cassava, okra, sorrel, things that grow without being watched. You dig into the dirt. sweat mixing with hope. For the first time, the ache in your back belongs to you. Here's the scholarly mystery. Was freedom ever really freedom? Historians debate whether post-emancipation societies truly liberated the formerly enslaved or just shifted the cage. Wages stayed low. Laws stayed cruel. Land stayed out of reach. But tonight, you don't care about debates. You sit by the fire with the others. You share roasted breadfruit and listen to a boy recite a story you told him years ago. He got some parts wrong. You don't correct him. It's his now. That's the point. Someone starts singing again, this time louder. Not defiant. Not mourning, just singing. The kind you do when there's a breeze and the moon is gentle. This is boring history for sleep, and yet this part refuses to be boring. It hums. It breathes. You lie on your back and close your eyes. No chains. No bell. Just the sound of your name, whispered by the sea, and now you rest. Not in a field. Not under an overseer's gaze. Not with your hands curled around a blade, but here, wherever you are, wrapped in quiet. Let your shoulders drop. Feel your jaw unclench. Breathe slowly. The story you just walked through is heavy. It should be. But the weight isn't yours to carry alone. You've stepped through a world many were never meant to survive. And yet here you are, breathing softer now, blinking slower, letting the dark wrap around you like a warm quilt stitched with stars. The ghosts of the past don't ask to be remembered in textbooks. They live in lullabies. In mango, slices passed hand to hand. In a name whispered just once before sleep takes hold. So let that name settle on your tongue. Let it drift backward through time, through waves and whispers, through tangled forests and moonlit fields, until it finds a quiet place to sleep too. This was boring history for sleep, yes, but not the kind that numbs. The kind that hums gently in your ear, brushing against memory, and reminding you that even in the deepest suffering, there was rhythm, resistance, and the human need to remember. Close your eyes. Let the sugar fields fade. Let the stars return to their silent work. And if you dream tonight, may it be of soft breezes, open skies, and a world where your name was never taken. All right, settle in. Tonight's story might make you squint into the darkness a little. Picture a house tucked into a narrow Kyoto alley, the kind that smells faintly of rain on stone and old tea leaves. Inside, the paper walls glow with candlelight, and your feet rest on tatami mats that creak softly under your weight. You're not a guest here. Your property. This is boring history for sleep, and tonight you're about to live the strange, quiet, and relentlessly choreographed life of a geisha. And yes, you probably won't survive the shoes. That alone is a deal breaker. Now, before your eyelids get heavy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments where you're re-listening from and what time it is over there. All right, let's begin. You're 8 years old when your parents sign the paper. They do it in quiet, with the kind of bowed heads that mean either shame or reverence. Maybe both. You're taken to an okiya, a geisha house, where you're stripped of your name, your old clothes, and any concept of bedtime you once had. From now on, you'll be known as something dainty, a blossom, or a moonbeam, or some seasonal word that's hard to pronounce if you're re-sleepy. You don't understand most of what's happening, but you understand your hair hurts. It's yanked and pinned and oiled into submission by a woman with hands that never shake. You sit still while she pulls it back so tightly you can feel your thoughts stretch. A hairpin longer than your forearm is pushed into the final knot. It feels like a sword. It sort of is. Your new home isn't cruel, just indifferent. You're not beaten, not starved, but you're expected to be invisible until you're not. The first rule you learn? Silence is more impressive than speech. The second? Never walk with your heels touching the ground. Float, they tell you, even if your ankles scream. The other girls avoid your eyes. They're older, better at this strange performance of femininity that doesn't quite feel like childhood or adulthood. They practice gestures in front of mirrors for hours. How to laugh without teeth, how to cry without a sound, how to pour tea with meaning. The house mother, the occasion, is the closest thing you have to a guide. She doesn't smile often, but when she does, it usually means trouble. She teaches you that this isn't just a job. It's a lifetime performance. You must learn everything: dance, music, conversation, etiquette, calligraphy, politics, and how to serve sake without making the client feel small. Most of all, you must learn to vanish into elegance. At night, you sleep on a thin futon in a shared room that smells like wax, perfume, and sweat. The air is full of whispers and the occasional cough. You tuck your feet under you to stay warm. You whisper to yourself the new phrases you learned that day. You dream of dancing, but in the dream, your limbs won't move. One morning, you're told you'll start wearing a training kimono. It takes nearly half an hour to get into. You're wrapped and folded and cinched and straightened until you can't really breathe, which, you're told, helps posture. You try to laugh, but it comes out as a wheeze. And just when you think you're settling in, they take your name again. You're given your Gaimea professional name meant to carry you through your new life. It's chosen for beauty, balance, and marketability. You don't get to pick it. It's whispered to you like a spell. You nod. That name is painted on a wooden plaque and hung by the door. You watch as the brush moves across the wood, slowly and with deep intention. That's when it hits you. You don't belong to yourself anymore. Not really. You belong to the okia, to the city, to the tradition. But mostly, you belong to the illusion. Here's a strange historical tidbit. Some geisha houses charge interest on the cost of a girl's training. That means if your debut as a full-fledged geisha was delayed, your debt grew. Imagine owing money because you weren't graceful enough by spring. Talk about student loans with hairpins. Historians still argue over how much autonomy a geisha truly had. Some say the okia system was empowering, offering women financial independence in a rigidly patriarchal world. Others argue it was gilded servitude with good lighting. You, at age 10, don't really care. You just want to undo your bun and scratch your scalp. By now, you've learned to speak without speaking, to move without drawing breath, to sit for hours without twitching. You're told it's beautiful. It feels like being a statue with sweaty palms. One evening, while cleaning the tea room, you catch a glimpse of your reflection in a low mirror. For a second, you don't recognize yourself. There's something eerie about that face painted white, framed by architecture instead of hair. It looks serene, but your toes are bleeding, your stomach growls, and your neck has forgotten what it means to rest. Later, you fall asleep in your training kimono. You're too tired to take it off. You dream of your old house. But the dream feels foggy, like it happened to someone else. That is the thing no one tells you about becoming a geisha. It doesn't happen all at once. You don't wake up and suddenly know how to charm a room or hold a fan like it matters. It creeps in like perfume on old silk, quietly, inevitably. And one day you realize this isn't a performance anymore. It's just who you are. You start your mornings before the sun even thinks about stretching. The hallway is dim, but the tea water is already boiling. You're not the only one awake. Some of the other girls are practicing their fan flicks in the courtyard, their movements silent and precise, like ghosts rehearsing a ballet. Your day is packed tighter than your obi. First comes dance, then shamisen, followed by calligraphy, etiquette, dialect coaching, flower arranging, tea ceremony, and music again. You blink and the daylight is gone. But your lessons continue under the yellow glow of lanterns until your fingers hurt and your knees feel like someone else's. This is your curriculum. You study how to move an inch and make a man fall in love, or at least tip generously. The shamisen lessons are the worst. Your teacher has all the warmth of a temple bell in January, and she slaps your knuckles with a fan every time you hesitate. The instrument strings are coarse, almost punishing, and after the third hour your fingertips feel like they've been sanded raw. But you smile, bow, and ask to repeat the phrase. That's elegance, suffering optional. Optional for whom? Exactly is never specified. At lunch, you eat something that tastes like a flower and probably used to be one. Your stomach stays mostly empty, not by punishment, but by expectation. A full belly is not ideal under 30 pounds of silk, and nothing kills a delicate bow like a sudden burp. Later, you're fitted for your evening kimono. The process takes so long, you could swear time folds in on itself. One woman holds your arms out. Another layers the under kimono. A third wraps the outer one, tugging firmly around your ribs. Then comes the obi wide and stiff, like a corset made of carpet. You can't breathe, but you're told to hold still anyway. The final touch is your hairpiece, lacquered and heavy, topped with seasonal flowers you're not allowed to pick yourself. Your shoes? They're called okobo, and they're basically tiny wooden stilts. Walking in them makes you feel like a toddler on stilts, pretending to be a swan. The trick, you're told, is to glide. Not stomp, not shuffle, just glide. Glide with dignity, even if your big toe is slowly dying inside a silk sock. It's around this time that your first fan injury happens. You're practicing your opening dance arms curved, fan flicking open in time with the shamisen, and your wrist cramps mid-flourish. The fan spins out of your hand, arcs through the air, and smacks a vase. The vase was valuable. So was the fan. You bow, apologize, and start over, ignoring the hot flush of embarrassment climbing your neck. Here's a historical oddity. Geisha fans were often used not just for dances, but to send coded messages. A subtle movement could imply anything from flirtation to dismissal. One popular signal involved fanning toward the chest, an invitation to intimacy or away from the body, which meant something more like, "You bore me to tears." You practice these too, even though you're years away from your debut. You fan toward the paper wall. The wall remains unimpressed. By your third year of training, your posture changes. Not because someone tells you to sit straighter, but because your muscles have adjusted. You find yourself bowing in conversation without realizing it. You start pausing before you speak, choosing the graceful word over the quick one. You smile less, but when you do, it lands like a charm. Even the way you cry has changed. One evening, after a particularly brutal lesson, when nothing you played on the shamisen sounded right, you retreat to your futon and let the tears fall. But you do it quietly, with a sleeve covering your mouth. You don't want the others to hear. You don't want the house mother to see your swollen eyes. Not because it is shameful, but because you're tired of being the girl who hasn't mastered control. You wonder sometimes what kids your age are doing outside the walls of the Okia. Do they climb trees? Do they sleep past dawn? Do they get to yell without consequence? You'll never know. Your days are spoken for, and your nights are rehearsals for a life you haven't fully earned yet. Occasionally, a geisha visits from another house, a full-fledged artist with a patron, a polished voice, and hair so intricate it looks sculpted rather than grown. She glides into the room like she owns gravity. You notice how everyone becomes smaller around her. Her laughter is practiced, but warm. Her eyes scan the room and skip over you. That's the worst part. You don't exist yet. One afternoon, you're practicing the tea ceremony when a cup slips. It doesn't break, but it clinks against the saucer in a way that makes everyone flinch. Your teacher says nothing, just holds out her hand. You place the cup in her palm. She nods once and gestures for you to sit. The lesson is over for you. For now. There is a rumor going around that one girl in the house had her debut postponed for a full year because she walked with her eyes downcast incorrectly. No one knows exactly what that means, but everyone tries to adjust their gaze just in case. Looking humble without seeming afraid, it's a delicate line, like so many things in this life. Some scholars today argue about how rigid the geisha training really was. Some say it was brutal perfectionism. Others say it was a path to artistic mastery. But neither version tells you what it's like to fall asleep with your fingers still curled, like you're re-holding a tea bowl. One night, as you wipe down your shamisen after practice, you hear another trainee humming a tune you recognize. It's from a dance you've been working on for months. But she sings it too quickly, and with the wrong rhythm. You want to correct her. Instead, you hum along at the proper tempo, loud enough for her to hear. She stops. You keep going. It's not much, but it's your first quiet victory. The morning of your mizadashi, your formal debut as a Mako arrives, like a storm pretending to be a sunrise. You barely sleep. You wake up before the others, pulse thudding behind your ears, like a kettle about to boil over. Everything you've learned, everything you've practiced, has led to this single performance, not on stage, but in how you enter a room. How you smile, how you don to trip in front of a patron with coin in his sleeve and opinions in his mouth. You're still not a full geisha yet, just a Mako, a geisha in training. But the transformation is theatrical, ceremonial, and irreversible. It starts with the makeup. Two older women apply the white base paint with slow, reverent strokes. It's cold. You flinch at first. Then comes the thick red around your eyes, the black for your brows, the subtle pink near the mouth. But here is the twist. They leave a doubly-shaped gap of bare skin at the nape of your neck. It's meant to look seductive, like an accidental glimpse of vulnerability. You look in the mirror. You barely recognize yourself. Then comes the haikizuri, the trailing kimono. It's absurdly long, nearly brushing the floor behind you. The hem is weighted so that every step becomes an exercise in precision. The pattern is bold and busy, flowers chasing birds in a whirl of colors you wouldn't dare wear outside this world. 3 women help you into it. You don't breathe until the obi is tied, so wide and thick it could double as a life raft. Which, honestly, you might need. The hairstyle is next, and it hurts more than childbirth, according to a retired geisha who once whispered that. Comparison with a mouthful of sake. Your hair is pulled and shaped into a structured tower of tradition. Wooden forms, wax, and pins hold it in place. Decorative combs are slotted in each one, telling the world what stage you're at in training, whether you're available for patrons, and whether you've earned your stripes yet. It's social status via scalp pain. Then silence. You kneel in the tea room of your okia. The house mother adjusts a tassel on your sleeve, nods once, and leaves the room. You're alone with your reflection and the polished floorboards, trying to believe you are the girl who deserves all this attention. But truthfully, you feel like you've stolen someone else's costume. The door slides open. It's time. You walk the hanamasi, the flower town, in a small procession. A few children follow at a distance, giggling behind their hands. An old man bows as you pass. You've practiced this walk for years, but your sandals are heavier now, the world louder. Every glance feels like a test. Every sound, a potential mistake. And then comes the first formal visit. A tea house where your debut will be quietly observed by patrons, senior geisha, and people with long memories. You kneel, bow, serve tea, smile, and laugh when you're supposed to. The conversations float past you like clouds. You're not expected to dazzle yet, just not to crumble. Still, your palms sweat under your sleeves. There is a trick to sitting in seiza, that traditional kneeling posture that looks elegant but slowly turns your legs into stone. You count breaths to keep still. 12, 13, 14. A pin slides slightly in your hair. You feel it shift like a threat, but you don't move. During a break, another Mako whispers that her wig once fell off mid-bow during her debut. She laughs about it now. You laugh too, but grip your neckline tighter. Here's a strange little fact. Geisha makeup changed depending on the occasion. The white base was for performances or special events. On casual days, many wore none at all. But the debut required full transformation. It was not meant to highlight your personality. It was meant to erase it and replace it with the ideal. And that's the point, really. On your Misadashi, you don't exist as yourself. You are a curated image, a living artifact, a performance of grace. You are what the room needs you to be: mysterious, composed, poised, silent when silence makes you glow brighter than words. Some scholars still debate whether the Mako system was oppressive or empowering. It depends who you ask. If you ask your ankles, they will file a formal complaint. But if you ask your reflection, it's starting to believe in its own myth. The highlight of the evening is your first solo dance. A slow, deliberate number involving a folding fan, a painted screen, and the illusion of floating. You step forward, fan in hand, and let the music guide you. You remember your teacher's voice. Don't perform the emotion. Be the stillness the emotion moves through. You don't know if you succeed, but when it's over, the room claps gently, not too loud. That would be impolite. Back at the Okia, the house mother pours you a small bowl of sweetened sake. A quiet congratulations. You bow, drink, and remove your hair ornaments one by one. Each pin sighs as it leaves your scalp. You peel off the makeup, stroke by stroke, and underneath it all, your face returns like an old friend who's been away too long. Later, lying on your futon, the air smelling faintly of rice powder and lacquer, you replay the day. The clumsy smiles, the sharp pin, the tea too hot to drink, the way the room looked when they watched you, the silence that tasted like power. You're not sure who you are anymore, but you're starting to understand who you have to be. Your nights change after your debut. You now walk into tea houses not as an apprentice, but as a Mako who can charm a room before even speaking. Or so they say. In truth, you're still watching the older geisha with the same wide eyes, only now from the next cushion over. The tea house smells like tatami and tobacco. Lantern light softens everyone's faces. The guests arrive in waves: businessmen, poets, actors, once even a military officer who talk more to his drink than to you. Each guest expects a particular version of the fantasy. The witty muse, the elegant listener, the clumsy ingenue. You adapt. That's your job. Your face is your most valuable costume. Your shamisen rests across your lap. You pluck it lightly, playing a tune you've practiced in your sleep. It's background music to the clinking of sake cups and polite laughter. A guest asks for something livelier. You switch styles without hesitation, grinning as your fingers glide across the strings. Later, someone compliments your talent. You bow and say thank you with just the right amount of humility, knowing you've played that same tune 300 times. Sake is served constantly. You pour, they drink. You sip politely, unless the guest insists you share a cup. Then you smile, raise your sleeve delicately, and drink just enough to make them feel interesting. You've learned the art of drinking without ever truly being drunk. Well, mostly. That one night when you accidentally insulted a local councilman's poetry still haunts you. Here is something odd you overhear one night. A geisha once pretended to be mute for an entire season, just to become more in demand. Clients called her the silent cloud. She made a fortune without saying a word. You try to imagine pulling that off, but you talk too much when you're nervous. Still working on that stillness thing. Backstage, before the tea house doors open, It's all pins, powder, and pettiness. You and the other Mako sit in a long room with low mirrors. The air buzzes with hair lacquer and quiet rivalries. Someone forgets your comb. Another one borrows your fan and returns it sticky. You smile through it all. Smiling is armor here. And besides, tomorrow, you'll take her best shamisen string and replace it with one slightly off key. It's not always pretty behind the silk curtains. There's gossip about who's securing patrons, who's being passed over, and who's been seen out walking alone with a guest. Technically, that's forbidden. Technically, lots of things are. But the rules bend like bamboo if you know how to lean with the wind. One older geisha silver in her hair, but still sharp in her movements, tells you this overshared pickled plums in the break room. Never fall in love. But if you do, make sure he owns at least 3 inns. You laugh, unsure whether she's joking. She doesn't blink. Not every night is glamorous. Sometimes the room is half full, the guests quiet or rude or drunk in the boring way. One man grabs your sleeve too tightly. You pull away with grace. A senior geisha cuts in with a joke and a swift refill of his cup. Crisis averted. The laughter resumes. Some evenings, though, something unexpected happens. Like the night a guest requests an obscure folk song. You hesitate and hum a few bars. His eyes light up. He hums along. Turns out he grew up hearing it from his grandmother. You finish the song together. Your voice is thin but steady. He claps. You bow. That's all. But for a moment, the whole room softens around you. That's the magic. You're not a performer. You're a mirror, a prism, a whisper of who they want to be, if only for a night. Now, a historical footnote. While geisha are often mistaken for courtesans, their actual role was more nuanced. They weren't supposed to offer romance, at least not officially. Their job was to create atmosphere, entertainment, intrigue. They were the original influencers, but with better posture and worse shoes. The scholarly debate continues. Were they independent women navigating a patriarchal world on their own terms? Or elegant hostages in silk? You don't know. You just know that your knees hurt by midnight and your cheeks ache from smiling. One night, as you're walking home through narrow streets with your sandals clicking softly on the stones, a light drizzle starts. You pull your sleeve up over your hair, careful not to smudge the makeup. Behind you, the house mother walks in silence, a small umbrella in her hand. She offers it to you without a word. You share it the rest of the way. Back at the Okia, you wipe off the paint, pin by pin, layer by layer, until your face is your own again. You stretch your arms. Your bones crack like firewood. You glance at the mirror. The reflection looks tired, sure, but satisfied. You lie down, futon cool against your spine, and let your thoughts drift. You were good tonight. No, better than good. They laughed at your joke about the moon and the banker. You think it might have been the best one yet. By now, your name carries a kind of weight. People recognize you. Some call it charm. Others say luck. You know better. It's repetition, practice, discipline disguised as grace. But here's the funny thing. Success doesn't make things simpler. It just makes the daggers sharper. The other Mako start watching you differently. Smiles come a beat too late. Compliments sound like questions. One girl begins dressing just like you, same flower pins, same sleeve pattern, even the same perfume. You pretend not to notice until she starts repeating your best jokes. Then it becomes personal. It's not open war. It never is. Everything here is whispered, passive, polite. You find a folded note in your geta one evening. It says nothing but includes a drawing of a cracked fan. It's either a warning or a prank. Either way, you burn it without reading the rest. At dinner, another trainee makes an offhand comment about your patrons. Too many, she says, for someone so new. You look up from your rice. Smile. Tell her you hope she gets one someday. The room goes silent. You win that round. Rivalry is part of the job. No one trains for years just to be background decor. Everyone here wants to be the favorite, the most booked, the one guests ask for by name. And when you reach that level, your biggest threat isn't failure. It's being replaced. You lose your favorite client to another geisha. He used to visit weekly. Now he sits in her room, laughing too loudly. You see her hairpin glinting through the screen. It's the same one you wore during your debut. Coincidence? Sure, let's call it that. The house mother warns you. Don't let envy show. A real geisha smiles at loss. That's part of the performance. But inside, you start planning. The next time you share a room with her, you perform a new dance. One you choreographed yourself. It's slower, more precise, painfully elegant. She stumbles afterward. Everyone notices, including him. Your private tutor says something one night that sticks. The only thing more fragile than beauty is reputation. It's true. You hear a rumor about a girl who is seen speaking to a samurai after hours. Nothing scandalous, just too familiar. Her bookings drop. She fades. You never see her again. Here's something scholars still debate. How much control did geisha really have over their lives? Some records suggest they could earn enough to buy their freedom, retire, even open their own okiya. Others argue the debts, the rules, the system kept them locked in silk cages. You wonder which version is closer to your own reflection. And then there's him, a guest you weren't supposed to remember. But you do. He doesn't flirt, doesn't boast, doesn't stare. He listens. That's rare. You find yourself adjusting your sleeve more carefully around him. You pour his tea slower, not because it's expected, but because you want to. One evening, after a performance, he waits outside. You step into the alley, heart doing something suspicious in your chest. He says nothing, just offers an umbrella. You shake your head, smile, walk past him without taking it. You think about that moment all night, and the next, and the one after. Love is forbiddance. Attachment complicates the illusion. You know this, but you also know the way he watches you isn't like the others. He doesn't look for performance. He looks for you. You ignore it. You perform. You smile. But then a letter arrives, folded into the sleeve of your kimono. No name, just a pressed camellia and a haiku written in his hand. You don't reply, but you keep the flower. You sleep with it beside your pillow for 3 nights before it turns to dust. Meanwhile, your reputation grows. You're booked every night. Your shamisen skills are requested by name. Guests quote your poems. You're in control now, which is its own illusion, of course, because behind every compliment is a calculation. Behind every smile, a strategy. And behind every door, someone waiting for you to trip. One night, another geisha claims she saw you walking alone with a man. She tells the house mother. You're summoned, questioned. You deny it. Technically, it's true. You didn't walk with him. You just paused. In an alley, under a roof, sharing silence. Still, it's enough to stain the air around you. You feel it for days. The pause in conversations when you enter a room. The sideways glances. One girl moves her futon farther from yours. You say nothing. You endure. Eventually, the rumors fade. Something juicier comes along. A fight between 2 geisha over a patron's inheritance. Someone faints during a performance. The house returns to its usual rhythm of envy, laughter, and lacquer. You keep dancing. You keep smiling. But sometimes, when the tea house quiets, and the last cup of sake cools untouched, you wonder what would have happened if you'd taken that umbrella. You imagine a different life. A simpler one. But you wake, adjust your hairpin, and forget. Because forgetting is part of the role, too. The day your feet stop aching after a night of dancing is the day you realize something is ending. You're older now. Not old, but no longer new. No longer the girl with fresh hair lacquer and trembling fingers. Your face still carries the grace they paid to see, but it's softened. Your smile comes slower, more real. You no longer need to think about posture. It lives in your bones now. A younger Maiko asks if you'll teach her the fan flick from your spring dance. You nod. Show her once. She gets it wrong. You don't correct her. She'll learn the hard way, just like you did. Your evenings grow quieter. The bookings shift toward the newer girls, ones with brighter kimonos and newer gossip. You still perform, but less often. And when you do, you feel it differently. Like slipping into a costume that no longer fits the same. You catch your reflection in the lacquered wall of the tea house one night. You tilt your head, curious. The hair ornaments seem heavier than they used to be. Or maybe your neck just gave up pretending. At dinner, someone mentions a former geisha who now runs a sweet shop by the river. You've heard that story before. She saved enough to buy her freedom, opened a store, married a quiet man who didn't talk too much. Or maybe she didn't. Maybe she disappeared entirely. The line between fact and folklore is thinner than your kimono lining. You start dreaming of other lives. Waking up without makeup. Breathing without obi cords. Sitting by a window just because the sun looks good there. And yet, when you stand on stage for what might be your final performance, you feel none of that. Only stillness. The shamisen in your lap. The weight of the fan in your hand. The room so silent you can hear your own breath. You close your eyes. Dance slowly, with intention. Every gesture is a memory. Every bow, a farewell. They applaud, softly, respectfully. You smile, bow low, and step back into the shadows. Your retirement is not announced. It just happens. One day, you stop painting your face. The next, you help tie someone else's obi. You give away your hair ornaments, one by one. The house mother nods when you tell her. She doesn't say much. She rarely does. Just pours you tea and lets it sit between you, steam curling upward like a blessing. Here's a strange historical truth. Some geisha retired quietly and lived peaceful lives. Others returned as teachers. Some as cautionary tales. A few are forgotten entirely. Their names painted over on the front door plaque. Their stories folded into others like lines of a poem no one finished reading. You become a teacher. Not officially. Just quietly. You correct a wrist here, offer a joke there, laugh softly when someone trips over her onem. You stay in the house. It's still home, even if you don't perform anymore. One afternoon, you find a camellia on your windowsill. No note, just the flower. You smile and leave it there. It dries by morning. Years later, a young geisha asks if it's true you once danced for a foreign prince. You shrug. Say maybe. Say probably not. Let her wonder. Legends are more useful than truth. Sometimes at night, you walk past the tea house and hear the music inside. You pause. Just for a second. Then keep walking. There's no final curtain. No encore. Just you. Barefaced. Feet in soft socks. Hair down. A cup of tea in your hands. You're no longer a geisha. But the performance lives in your bones. You move through the world like it still matters where your hands rest when you laugh. Now, just breathe. Let the last sounds of the shamisen fade, the soft pluck of strings dissolving into quiet. The painted screens are folded, the lanterns have gone out, and the tea house is dark, except for the memory of laughter still lingering in the corners. You've taken off the kimono, let down the heavy hair, and washed away the white paint that turned your face into someone else's. What's left is you, just you, still, silent, and completely real. Outside, the streets of Kyoto sleep. The stone paths are slick with mist, and the wind carries a hint of incense and rain. The city no longer calls your name. And that's all right. You've already given it everything. There's nothing more to prove. No more perfect bows. No more careful words. Just the slow return to stillness and peace. Close your eyes now. Picture the soft rustle of silk, the clink of porcelain, the sound of footsteps fading down an empty hallway. Imagine sitting in a quiet garden, the moon above, your hands warm around a cup of tea. The world doesn't need anything from you anymore. And you don't need anything from it. This is the part where you let go of the stage, of the rules, of all the faces you wore for others. Tonight, you sleep as yourself. And that is more than enough. Sweet dreams.